Hey, good morning, everyone. William Hemsworth here. Thank you for joining me on the Bible Catholic channel, and we're also streaming on the Four Persons Network. I have my good friend here, Ken Litchfield. Ken is a Catholic apologist. He's been on many radio shows. He has his own show on the Four Persons Network and his YouTube channel called Catholic Ken. Airs every Friday morning, and he's author of a great book. You can see it in the background there. How Old is Your Church? An Introductory Guide to Catholic Apologetics. Ken, how you doing, my brother?
I'm doing well. How's William today?
Hey, doing well. It's a beautiful day here in Tucson. A little early, but it's all good. I'm up early anyway. Beautiful day. Man, can't complain. How's everything in your neck of the woods?
Kind of chilly, and it's 11 o'clock already here. So I've been up since 4:45.
That's when I was, but 3 hours behind you. So all right. So before we get started on our topic, I mean it's one of our favorite topics, our Lord, obviously. But can you give us our audience a little bit about your background if you don't mind?
Sure. I'm a cradle Catholic. Grew up in the church, and then around 2015 I started taking the faith more seriously, and my son introduced me to the Left Behind books, and diving into the rapture is what actually got me into apologetics. And Scott Hahn and Tim Staples saved me from falling into the rapture trap. And then they talked about the church fathers, so I started looking into those, and I found out they're Catholic. So it really helped me confirm that, yes, I have the right church. I'm in the right church. And I started listening to Catholic Answers and Called to Communion, John Martinoni from the Bible Christian Society, and just all that information, kind of like filtered in, got blended together, and I started answering questions online about the Catholic faith. And then I started saving my answers because people would ask the same questions. And those became my book. And now I have a library of over 300 stock answers I can just copy and paste to people.
All right, good deal. Yeah, you mentioned the Left Behind books, man. I grew up as an evangelical in the 1990s. I grew up in the Wesleyan Church, and man, those books were everywhere. And the movie was out. That was a big deal. So it's interesting that led you back. That led you to I guess what if you don't mind, I know we're kind of go off topic a little bit. What prompted you to research that a little more and get into like Scott Hahn and Tim Staples and everything else?
They talked about the rapture and debunked it basically. But because they had talked about, they were both converts, and they talked about the church fathers, and that made me want to dive deeper into the Catholic faith. And so I started learning more and more about what I believe and why I believe it.
All right, good deal. Well, we thank Tim LaHaye for Ken's work today. All right, good deal. All right, so happy Easter, everyone. It is still Easter. Easter is not one day. He is risen. And today, I invited Ken on. We're going to discuss the resurrection. So, Ken, can you tell us, in your work that you've done online, and you're all over the internet, you're answering people all over the place, what's one of the top objections that you've seen to the resurrection?
Well, with the atheists, they like to say that, somebody else got crucified, or Jesus was just unconscious and then, woke up while he was still in the tomb. And if you understand Jewish culture at the time, they would, when somebody would die, they would, hold the body basically like for 3 days in case that person came back to life, because they didn't really know for sure he was dead. And that's why when Jesus calls Lazarus from the tomb, he'd been in there for 4 days, and his sister says, there's gonna be a stink, and but Jesus calls him forth, and he is still alive. But the significance of the 4 days is like, For the Jews, if you were still dead after 4 days, you are dead. And so that's why Jesus waited actually to go to Lazarus and his sisters to bring him back to life, so people would know that is a real miracle.
Now, you had mentioned something a little bit ago, like atheists will mention, like maybe he fell asleep, and this is known as like the swoon theory. Can you explain what that is and how that's actually, well, been debunked several times over?
Right. So the atheists like to say that Jesus was just unconscious from all his injuries, and they thought he was dead, so they took him down. The Bible tells us that they didn't break Jesus' legs, but they did break the legs of the two thieves that were crucified with him. So, for them, it's plausible that Jesus was just passed out in a coma and came out of a coma in the tomb. But if you nail somebody through their hands and feet, and then they thrust a spear into his side and water and blood pour out of him, that's a pretty good indication that that person is dead. You can't, a wound, 6, 8, 10 inches long in your side, is going to make you bleed out and die, even if you're just in a coma. Even in our modern technology, nobody would survive that, if that happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty conclusive. I've never understood how people can. I think it takes more faith to believe in that swoon theory than it does just to believe that he resurrected. So,
right. I often mention that it takes a lot of faith to be an atheist, because you have to believe in a lot of stuff that can't be scientifically proven.
Right. And you're still believing in something, even when you just say it's a lack of belief, right?
Right.
Now, what are some other proofs of the resurrection that you've come across that you help people with?
Right. Well, one of the great things in in the Catholic Church, the first people to see Jesus alive, after he rose from the dead, are women. And women, their testimony was considered half the quality of a man's testimony at that time. And we Christians, we put women right in your face and say, these women saw that Jesus was alive. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. And I think there was another Mary. The Mary crew went to help Jesus, anoint Jesus' body in the tomb, because it was the day after the Sabbath, and they could actually do some work again. But they found that the tomb is not, or Jesus was not in the tomb. And the Bible talks about how they were wondering, who's going to roll away the stone, because the stone was very heavy and they couldn't move it by themselves. And that was a question I got from my friend in Pakistan this morning, is, if Jesus could go through the walls when he met with his apostles, why did he have to roll away the stone to be resurrected? So it's a great question, but the simple answer is, like, Jesus rolled away the stone so that everybody else would know that he had risen from the dead. He could have passed through the stone if he wanted, but by rolling away the stone, then everybody could see that the tomb was empty. Otherwise, people might be on the outside of the tomb thinking that Jesus is in there, but he's actually had resurrected. And the burial cloths, like the Shroud of Turin, are, crumpled up on the floor, but the napkin that would have been placed over his face, was neatly folded or rolled up and laid in the place where his head would have been, on the stone bench in there.
Okay. Now you mentioned the testimony of women, and I've come across this as well. Like, if the apostles were trying to lie, probably wouldn't be the best way to start a new religion or this resurrection with the testimony of women, right?
Right.
All right. All right. What other proofs of the resurrection are there, Ken?
Right. Well, Jesus appears to his disciples in the upper room. Thomas isn't there the first time, but when Jesus, meets with his apostles, um, he eats and drinks with them, showing that he is a physical being, not just a ghost that is appearing to them in the upper room. So they know that he actually is still a human being that has resurrected. And when Thomas comes, Thomas is there at the second appearance of Jesus in the upper room, and he actually examines Jesus' hands and feet and side for himself, so that he knows that yes, Jesus did resurrect from the dead. He is alive, and Jesus tells him, you believe because you have seen, but happy are those who believe who have not seen. And so that's the rest of us here today, and even other people that the apostles talked to after Jesus ascended into heaven. And let's see, in the Bible it talks about how Paul says, Jesus appeared to over 500 people, and some of them are still around, and you can go ask them. So we're quite willing to let people check out the testimony with many other people. They don't just have to take the word of the 11 that were in the upper room at that time. You can ask lots of other people, and they say, yeah, I saw Jesus after he had been crucified.
It's like one of those childhood dares. St. Paul's telling these people, like, you don't believe me? I mean, that's fine. Go ask these guys.
Your
Like, they saw him too.
Dropped out again.
Hello. Oh my goodness. How about now?
Nope, still no.
Hello.
Well, until William rejoins us, I will continue on with some more here. When Jesus did rise from the dead, he also appeared on the beach and was roasting fish as the apostles were out there fishing. And when they came near the shore, he told them if they have caught any fish overnight, and they told him no. So he sends them out again and tells them to cast the net on the right side of the boat. And this is significant because the sun was already coming up, and by putting the net down then, the fish would be able to see it, and the fish would normally avoid the net. That's why they would go fishing at night, so the fish couldn't see the net down in the water. And they end up catching 153 fish, which is a miraculous number for what they would normally be catching. And this was when there was daylight. So this is like a miraculous catch provided through the miracle of Jesus for their benefit. And so they bring the net ashore, and when Peter recognizes that it's Jesus there on the shore roasting fish for them, he puts his clothes back on, because while they're fishing, he didn't have any clothes on, so that he wouldn't have to worry about his clothes getting wet. It was a standard thing that they did back then. And he comes ashore to Jesus. And then the rest of the apostles bring the net ashore with all the fish in it. And it tells us that the fish are very large too. They're not just little fish that they happen to snag because they didn't know better than to not get caught in the net. These are full-grown fish that should have known better. But through the miracle of Jesus, they are caught in the net and brought ashore. And Jesus is already roasting fish for them, and they all sit down and eat the fish that Jesus is already roasting. And they have a breakfast of fish. So this is kind of like a third appearance of Jesus with the disciples, who had become apostles by this time. So it looks like William is rejoining us.
Trying.
And still no audio. Can you hear me, William? No. Oh, okay. I've been continuing on with the show in your absence. But maybe we want to try rescheduling this.
Yeah, let's do that. I can hear myself, but not you. All right. Thank you, Ken.
Okay.